By August 1945, Nazi Germany had been defeated, the concentration camps had been liberated, and 2 atomic bombs had been dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. World War II had ended. The Big Three, however, had begun to make plans for peace long before August 1945. Of all the topics discussed by the Big Three, deciding Germany's and Europe's future was the most important. The first major discussion took place in Tehran, Iran in December 1943. Churchill believed supervision of German industry would be enough to prevent a future war. Franklin Roosevelt suggested dividing Germany into 5 military districts. Joseph Stalin, however, saw these as not enough. He wanted Germany to be broken up and kept broken. He also wanted to limit French, Polish, and the Italian militaries, ensuring that the Soviet army was the only major force in Eastern Europe. The meeting ended with many ideas left undecided. In February 1945, the Big Three met again in Yalta in the Soviet Union. The main discussion focused on the disarmament, demilitarization, and separation of Germany. The Soviet Union had suffered destruction and death due to the German invasion in 1941. For reparations, Joseph Stalin wanted 80% of Germany's heavy industry, which included iron and steel manufacturers, chemical laboratories, and electrical engineering, along with specialized military industries and fuel ports. Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt agreed that reparations must be paid, but not to the point of economic chaos. Neither the US nor Great Britain wanted to assist Germany with their reparation bill. The question that remained was how to make Germany harmless and still be able to pay the reparations. The final meeting occurred in Potsdam, Germany, in July 1945. The Soviets had destroyed much of eastern Germany on their invasion to Berlin. During the invasion, much of the industry was captured and sent back to the Soviet Union. During the Potsdam Conference, Truman, Churchill, and Stalin finally agreed on reparations. They also decided how Germany would be divided. Germany would be divided into 4 military zones of occupation. Great Britain, France, and the United States would control the 3 zones of Western Germany, while the Soviet Union would control Eastern Germany. Berlin, the capital, which was in the Soviet zone of occupation, was also divided into 4 zones. The decisions of Potsdam and the division of Germany would lay the foundations for the Cold War. Following the end of World War II, many actions were taken to prevent further war. One step was the development of the United Nations. Unlike its predecessor, the League of Nations, the United States and other major countries joined this organization. In 1945, 50 countries created a charter that outlined the goals of the group and to fix the problems caused by the 2 world wars. The United Nations was designed to save future generations from the horrors of war and protect fundamental human rights for men and women in nations large and small. The UN also developed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Of the many authors of the document, Eleanor Roosevelt, FDR's widow, was a major supporter. She was the first chairperson for the Commission on Human Rights. The Declaration of Human Rights protected humans from slavery, torture, or degrading treatment, protection from discrimination, and freedom from unjust persecution. Many of the articles in the document were designed to address the horrors inflicted during the Holocaust. The UN would be responsible for enforcing the Declaration. Unlike the confusion of the League of Nations, the UN was a peacekeeping organization. UN troops could not join a war or military conflict. Their only job was to keep the peace. The United Nations also created a Security Council made up of 15 nations, 5 of which are permanent members. These included China, France, the Soviet Union, the United States, and Great Britain. All 5 members had to agree on policy changes, or actions taken by the UN. Another step taken to ensure peace was the Geneva Conventions. Although they started in the 1860s, after World War II, the convention with the Red Cross issued general rules to be applied during wartime. Among the rules, it was required to treat prisoners of war fairly and humanely. They were not to be tortured or killed. Prisoners of war were also to be given adequate housing to guarantee hygiene and healthiness. Perhaps the most important was the prohibition of chemical and germ warfare, especially use of such chemicals against civilians. From 1945 to 1949, the Western powers also conducted the Nuremberg trials. During these, Nazi Party officials, high-ranking military officers, and others were tried for war crimes, specifically their roles in the Holocaust. Of the prosecutors, one of the most important was Supreme Court Justice Robert H. Jackson. In his opening statement, Jackson said, "What makes this inquest significant is that these prisoners represent sinister influences that will lurk in the world long after their bodies have returned to dust. We will show them to be living symbols of racial hatred, of terrorism and violence, and of the arrogance and cruelty of power." Among the men tried was Joseph Goebbels, head of the Nazi propaganda, Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS and the Gestapo, and Hermann Göring, Hitler's second-in-command. Most of those tried were found guilty and executed. The Nuremberg trials played a vital role to history. It was during the proceedings the controversy of the phrase, "I was just following orders," and the determination of guilt developed. The trials also set a framework for later war crime trials, including those in Tokyo in 1946, in Yugoslavia in 1993, and in Rwanda in 1994. Although the actions taken after World War II were designed to protect human rights and preserve peace, they also created the foundations for one of the longest ideological wars in history.